Hi, welcome to Yuva and UNICEF's Impact with Youth, a series where we bring together young change makers and global thought leaders onto the same platform to brainstorm how we can create impact with youth. My name is Vibha Nadig. I'm the founder and director of Outlawed India, a not-for-profit working towards enabling last-mile justice delivery. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by Kevin, who is the CEO of Generation Unlimited, or as we know it in India, Yuva. Yuva is a public, private, and youth partnership platform, which interestingly was named by young people themselves. I'm also so excited to be joined by Rohini Nilekani, who is an author and a philanthropist who has changed the Indian social sector landscape. Rohini is the chairperson of Rohini Nilekani Philanthropies and is the co-founder and director of Ek Step, which is a not-for-profit education platform. On the occasion of International Volunteer Day, we're so excited to be discussing purpose-driven volunteering. So let's dive right into it, yeah? I thought it would be fun if we could start off by maybe talking to each other about the most inspiring volunteer experience we've had and maybe what we learned from it. Rohini, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, thank you. Namaste everyone and hi Vibha. Hello Kevin. Great to be here talking to you both. Volunteering. Yeah, I used to do some volunteering even when I was very young. Now I'm not a Yuva at all, but it's nice to relive that part with this question. Mm-hmm. So even when I was very young, I was into a bit of volunteering. We had opportunities through our colleges and schools to do volunteering as well. But as I grew into adulthood, and you asked for only one example, we have a very interesting not-for-profit here in Bangalore, and it's spreading across India now, called Ugly Indian. And don't be fooled by its name. It's about making India beautiful and how we should not allow our public spaces to be sometimes the messy way they are. So many volunteers just do like a flash, like come together like a flash citizen mob and take an area which is not so nice and turn it into something beautiful that citizens can be proud of. So I've done a few of those cleanups, in fact right outside the building where we are sitting and in other places. And I think that's fun because it's not very planned. People see something and feel the need to fix it. Everybody brings in whatever skills they have. Whether if you can paint, you paint. If you know how to put bricks together, you do that. Whatever you need to do. It's great fun and you feel really good at the end of it and the place looks beautiful too.
Absolutely. Kevin, I'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah, it's a great example. As I think back all the way to just after I graduated from university as well, and you know, I didn't think of it as volunteering at the time, but now upon reflection, I realize it was volunteering. I was coaching basketball, so I was a competitive basketball player. And then after I finished, I actually started working in disadvantaged communities all around the city where I was. And working with young people from those communities. And I was able to actually use the skills that I had, the passion that I had, to improve the lives of others. Some of these young people who came into our basketball programs and were able to get scholarships and go study in the US, it really transformed the trajectory of their lives. So what did I learn from that? I think when you look for volunteering opportunities, and Rohini, you just mentioned this, you know, look at something you're good at, because you want to contribute. So figure out what your skill set is, therefore where can you have the biggest impact? And the second thing is, if you're working on something that you're good at, that you can contribute on, it's probably going to be a passion for you. So I was able to put in tens of hours a week. I was working full time, but if I wasn't working, I was coaching. So find your passion, find your skill set, and then double down on that.
That's incredible. I really resonate with you saying I was volunteering, but I didn't know I was a volunteer. Because I think that's how I started out. In schools, I loved teaching in government schools and I participated in cleanup drives. And I was there because I was super passionate about it. And I didn't know that I was part of this bigger culture of volunteering. And now the not-for-profit I run, I feel a lot of verticals of our work subconsciously gravitate toward the volunteering work. Right now, we have law students across the country who work in spaces like government schools and Anganwadis, where they volunteer to help people learn about the law. And I love teaching, so this is something I volunteer to do as well, even though I'm running the organization. And one of the days, I was taking a workshop on key criminal law processes, which is a tough thing to teach. And law is incredibly complex. So we've committed ourselves to teaching in regional languages. So I was talking about processes like getting first information report registered in Kannada, which is my mother tongue. And it was going great. We were having a great time, except in the middle of the class, a student put up his hand and said, "Ma'am, I know you're teaching in Kannada, but you're still saying things like Indian Penal Code and arrest warrant in English. So I'm just not able to understand what you're saying." Which was a huge learning for me. I think sometimes we make volunteering more about the act of volunteering and the person instead of the impact that we're really trying to create. If we're not constantly thinking about the stakeholder and the change that we're trying to do through volunteering, it's just one step forward and two steps back, right? We have to constantly think about the stakeholder and what we're trying to achieve. And just on stakeholders, actually, Rohini, I'd love to hear from you about what we can do to get stakeholders like not-for-profit, the government, the private sector. How can we get them more involved to enhance youth participation in civic issues and volunteering?
Yeah, I think especially in India that becomes an imperative. We are such a young country, and if we don't involve young people in all processes of society, Samaj Sarkar Bazaar, as I keep saying, we need to have youth being able to represent themselves because they are the future much more. So I think there is some work towards that, both at the policy level. Certainly many civil society organizations that we are proud to work with are led by young people. So in that sense, coming to the society sector, the civic sector, I think there is a lot of youthful energy already.
Yeah.
And what can business do? Maybe I should turn to you, Kevin. What should business do more to bring out the youth voice more? Because I also have started to think about what will be the future of work, right? And I think young people think about that a lot.
Absolutely.
Because so much change is happening in the markets for work and jobs and livelihoods. So what should corporates do more of to include the youth voice? You see, as a journalist, so I might be taking over halfway from you and asking the questions to both of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think, corporations have all of the expertise that the young people need. So corporations are training their own workforces in the skills they need for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I think too often education systems are still stuck training young people for the jobs of yesterday. So what we need to do is get the private sector to work lockstep with governments to make sure the skills young people are, and before this session started, we were talking exactly about this. What are those transferable skills that young people are going to need that they can carry through their entire career? Who knows what those skills are best? The private sector. Who knows how to train young people for those skills? The private sector. So what we've often done is advocate to the private sector to take their world-class skilling, their world-class training from behind the corporate firewall, because typically they keep it just for their employees, and to make it available to young people at scale so that we can empower massive numbers of young people.
Yeah, so we keep talking about creating more and more digital public goods that can be globally accessed, especially by young people. And certainly this kind of knowledge, which otherwise is not shareable, is one of those ways to create new synergies. So that people can have knowledge and skilling in their hands as atomized as possible, as just in time as possible, as much in the language of their choice as possible.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think that's where the future is headed, and I think volunteering is a huge part of this. In the old days we used to have a government program called Each One Teach One.
Yeah.
And because there was a lot of huge adult population in our country earlier that was not so literate, and it was both for children and for adults. So there was a lot of enthusiasm about that. But today I think there could be a digital program like this for young people. Anybody with the skills of the digital age can volunteer to teach one more person to come into this digital age with much more agency, with much more knowledge, with much more dignity. And I think that's a great thing. And here in Bangalore, in the heart of the tech world of India, I know hundreds of volunteers who do that, and many of them are very young, the young whiz-kids. Actually, young people, you could teach old people how to stay alive in the digital age.
It's really interesting, Rohini, so you've just connected a couple of dots for me. We actually at Yuva on Generation Unlimited worked with the Ministry of Youth and Sports here in India on a digital skilling platform. In fact, in the last 11 months, we've skilled and certified over 1 million young people, 63% young women. But I didn't realize until just this moment. In fact, the program is called, in partnership again with the ministry, Each One Help One.
There you
And
go.
so it must have been inspired by the program you were talking about. And so every young person who goes through and is digitally certified then has to go into the community and help a community member learn that digital skill and apply it either within their life, whether it be to open a bank account, a digital bank account, create some posters to promote their business through PowerPoint. And it's been a very powerful program because you have that ripple effect.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because we're now talking a lot about young people, right? It's something more recent. I feel like up until recent times, we've been thinking about young people more as an afterthought. And this idea that young people are the future and therefore they should have a say in what goes on today is relatively recent. And we're still navigating how to really make young people partners, right? And I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about my experiences with being a young person who started her own company, who's done volunteering. I think the first thing that we need to start doing a little bit better is start thinking about young people as drivers of change instead of people who are sitting in the back seat, right? We need to have young people at the forefront making the decisions. They need to be involved in program design, not just given a call in the last second saying, hey, someone dropped out, can you come do this task for me? And we're trying to do that at Outlawed. We have something called the Active Citizen Challenge, where in law schools across more than 10 cities in the country, we're getting young people to go into their communities and help local communities learn about the law and engage with the law. And we took a very conscious decision to step back from the execution. We said we're going to let the students do everything themselves. And the impact has been incredible. We've had students in the rural parts of Uttarakhand, rural parts of Punjab, all over the country working with government schools, working with high courts, with Panchayat Raj institutions to bolster local engagement with the law. And I think that's what we firmly believe, which is hand over the reins to young people, right? But I feel like we use the term young people very loosely, right? Young people, that's not a homogeneous category. And I think that's the second thing I want to talk about a little bit, which is that when we talk about young people, we're usually talking about a very specific demography. People who are English speaking, people from tier 1 cities, people who've been to good colleges that have an abundance of opportunities. And we need to rethink what volunteering and civic engagement means for students who don't come from this background. Can we build civic engagement for students from the communities that we seek to serve? Can we build programs that are inclusive of gender, of language, of socio-economic background? Which I think is really interesting because we've talked about language so much, and the podcast is happening in English. English is something that's overwhelmingly used, right? And maybe the last thing I want to talk about before I hand it over to you to see your experiences is, can we build volunteering and civic engagement programs that build independence for young people? As not-for-profits, we want to stay relevant to the people that we're serving, and that's great. But what we've also done through this is made ourselves central to the work that young people do. If we can get young people to outside of organizations take their own civic actions, that would be so impactful. If a young person does a tree plantation drive through a not-for-profit, that's fantastic. But if a young person does a tree plantation drive by themselves, that means they've internalized those values. It shows entrepreneurial spirit that's outside just being part of an organization, and that's what we need to drive, making youth independent to take their own civic actions. And that's where I'm going to hand it over to you, which is what can we do to get young people to take more steps to become civically conscious?
One thing I do want to say, though, is I don't agree that we think of youth as only those who are urban and privileged. Obviously, in India, that's not true.
Absolutely.
You have 54% of the population below 25. So, no, it's the youth actually who are not in a privileged situation that we have to focus on more.
Absolutely.
And I think they need to get more space and voice. I agree. But the good thing about the digital age is that language need not be a barrier anymore. Just in this building with our teams at Take Step, we are ensuring that all services are all learning practices. In fact, we are doing a project with the Supreme Court so that all orders and judgments are simultaneously translated into many Indian languages. So I think the language barrier will be overcome by technology. As we speak, it's happening. So in that sense, I think there's a new way for youth to connect across these barriers and divides. And technology can allow young people to cross over many such barriers. And those barriers sometimes keep the underprivileged. And if you can unlock and open up these barriers, I think there are lots of possibilities. But I did also want to say that we were talking about volunteering. I think you can also volunteer for fun things. I don't want old people like me to burden youth with the sense that, oh my God, you have the burden of the world on your shoulders. Life is beautiful. There's a lot of joy and beauty to be found. And volunteering can also be seen. You can help a child to draw. You can help somebody to do bird watching, to look at nature, to re-ground yourself, to re-root yourself in the natural world. Otherwise, you're only talking about livelihoods and employment and earning money, but there are many other things of extreme value where you can share a spirit of exploration. So I don't want to just put burden on young people, but allow yourselves to be free to enjoy the beauty of the world.
And that's the fun. Sorry, go ahead.
No, Vibha, I think you made a really important point when you talked about how do we really empower young people to drive the change. So there's one model, the kind of traditional volunteering model. We're going to go out, we're going to plant trees. So all the young people show up and we give them the trees and we tell them where to plant them, and then everybody kind of checks the box that they did their volunteer activity on Saturday afternoon. Great. But I think you were asking, how can we really put youth at the front so the impact is powered by the youth and designed by youth? So we have a global volunteer initiative active right now in over 40 countries with 10 million volunteers. And the model here is very, very different. And it is a hyper-local model. So it doesn't matter if you're in a last-mile community, if you're in an urban slum, or if you're living in a first-class community somewhere. What we do is we ask young people to identify problems they're facing and their community is facing. Then to form teams with their colleagues, with their other young people, to work on and prototype using design thinking and other methodologies. What are the solutions? And then to get out there in the world and make it happen. And those are exactly the skill sets I think you were talking about that you're going to need in your life as well. Even if you do decide to start a company at some point, you have to identify a problem, you have to put a team together, you have to communicate, you have to come up with a vision, then you have to get out there and make it happen. So I think that the most progressive forms of volunteerism right now gives the power to young people to say, identify problems that you're struggling with, your community struggling with, design the solutions and make it happen. And what we do is sit behind them just to give them the support that they need to make that possible.
I love that. And Rohini, I love what you spoke about tech, right? About how we can use technology as an enabling platform to get young people more involved in volunteering and in civic action in general. And I'd love to maybe dig deeper into that. What kinds of tech, especially maybe in your experience that you've been using recently, what platforms can we start giving more attention to, and can we direct the youth towards to get them more engaged in civic action, to get them to step out and say, hey, I'm going to spend my Sunday volunteering and participating in my local community. I'd love to hear from you about that.
I mean, isn't that a perfect segue into GenU and what you are trying to do?
Absolutely.
Let's talk a bit about that.
We use tech platforms a lot to increase both the efficiency, the scale, and the impact of initiatives. We have something called the Youth Hub here in India, also working with the government on Mission Life and Merry Life. I think kind of strategically or conceptually, the power of technology is a couple of things when it comes to volunteering. One, we can use technology to get skilling out at scale for a very low cost. It used to be that you needed in-person training, which is very high touch, very expensive to do at large scale. We can now make that available to anybody who has access to a phone and data. I think secondly, and maybe most importantly, and I think with the advent of AI, this is going to get even better, is we can now match young people to opportunities they care about. So it used to be your volunteer opportunities was whatever your local school was doing, or your local church was doing, or your youth group or sports team was doing. Now, very quickly, you can get onto the website, and this is what we're doing with Youth Hub, to aggregate all the volunteer activities, not even necessarily only across your country, but there's global opportunities to advocate, raise your voice in the United Nations, at COP, the big climate summit. So using technology to be able to bring a world of opportunities and to personalize it to what you care about and connect you to the right opportunity in real time. I think that's the real power of technology.
Yeah, I think if we remain technology enabled and not technology led, where the technology is not the point, but what it can enable is the point, then I think you can help to distribute the ability to solve in your own context. That's the power of good technology. It allows searchability, discoverability, and it allows you to connect to new networks and new nodes. And it doesn't always, you have to design for it, but put choice back in the hand of the citizen. So
Absolutely.
that is what I think young people can help to keep on building.
I was thinking that maybe one of the last things that we could talk about is there are a lot of young people who want to get started, except they don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. If you had to leave a young person watching this with one piece of advice on how to get started, what would you like to tell them? Kevin?
Should I quote Nike's slogan, just do it? I think volunteerism is not dissimilar to entrepreneurship, whether you're starting a company or starting a social venture. At some point, you've got to identify a problem you want to solve and then put together a team, work on a vision, and just go for it. There's nothing between the kind of blood, sweat, and tears, and a little bit of joy and laughter as well, to actually drive forward. So I think, find a problem you want to solve, find other people who want to solve it with you, and then just roll up your sleeves and get to work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think young people, just close your eyes, understand, I bet you think something is wrong with the world. What is that? And why do you care enough to be part of fixing it? If so, whatever it may be the smallest thing, that why are there stray dogs on my street which are looking so hungry? Or it could be, why is the world warming so fast? It could be anything from there to there. But seriously think, does that bother you? What bothers you? And then if it bothers you, what do you want to do about it? It's really that. And it could be, there is nobody who's not bothered about something. But what we need to say is, can I afford any more to not do something about what I am bothered about? And I think volunteering, what we call seva, paropakar bhava, your love for somebody else. Human beings are wired for that. Human beings are wired to help other people. Can we tap into that part of ourselves, into that empathy, into that curiosity? I think the answers come after that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think sometimes as young people who are entering spaces where the rest of the people may not be as young as them, it can be intimidating. And I think they need to understand that no one knows current trends with social media, with technologies, as well as young people do. So tapping into the skills that they have because of their age, because of their context is so crucial. And not going along with things just because that's the way it's been done in the past. Feeling free to be creative, to do things differently. And just taking that step, like you said, is what I think is so important. This has been such a fantastic conversation. I cannot thank you enough. But before we close out, I do have some fun questions for you guys.
See, this is what young people do.
If you had to pick a partner to volunteer with you from a book or a movie or a TV show, who would you pick?
Since I'm in India, it won't surprise you that I would select Gandhi. And I think he has a quote that I've always remembered, which is, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. So I think he would be a perfect partner.
I don't know, you you got me there. I don't know, for some reason I can only think of E.T. because E.T. may bring some really out of the planet, out of this world experience to volunteer with. I'm sorry, it also gives away my age.
Not at all. I think if I had to pick, I would pick Jo from Little Women. I've been thinking about that a lot. I think she'd be super bold, fun person to really volunteer with. If you were to tell me your volunteering experience in just one word that would make me stand up and say, hey, I'm going to go out tomorrow and volunteer, what word would you pick? I can get us started to give you guys a couple of seconds. I think I would pick exhilarating.
Yeah, that's a good word. I would say meaningful.
I think I've got about 7 that I'm thinking about. I think I would go with future, because for me volunteering is about creating the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you folks so much. This
you.
has been an incredible session with you where we got to discuss purpose-led volunteering and how to really get the youth involved in civic participation. And I've loved having you folks here. Thank you so much.
Namaste. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of another episode of Impact with Youth, where we got to talk about the incredible impact that volunteering can have on our individual lives and our collective futures. Stay tuned for the next episode.